sections will touch up important notification circulars. Nifka had prepared these notifications, so I request you to prepare a summary of the important notification circulars. Keep that question open towards last 2 days of this particular program. So let's go back. Good morning to all of you. Today, haven't we become a family? We hardly know each other. I don't know most of your names, barring 3 or 4. I was driving today and I didn't have driver. So I'm driving thinking, become a family. We are so used to coming here. जब ये खत्म होगा तब क्या करोगे आप?
सर एक रिक्वेस्ट करेंगे आपसे दोबारा रिक्वेस्ट कर लेंगे सब वैसे मिलने के लिए।
मैं काफी और लोग सेशन में हैं। जो लोग उनको नहीं बुलाया है, जिसके पास बहुत लंबी लिस्ट है। We will repeat it, but I think at the end of 50 hours, let's go plan a picnic. Nitika has planned only picnics in her life, but no out of living picnic. A proper picnic, खाने वाली, पीने वाली नहीं. So we request Nitika to plan a picnic at the end of the session, and then we'll have, I think we'll come to know each other a little better. But I was telling my wife, मैं क्या मेरे को तो ऐसा होने लगी जाना है. Early morning I pick up laptop just going through for so क्या पढ़ा रहे हो आप? कुछ केस कर रहे हो क्या? मैं पढ़ाई हो रही है, आप पढ़ रहे हैं.
आपकी यही चीज जो है हम सबको खींच कर ला रही है.
सब एग्जैक्टली सही कर रहे हैं. हाँ बोरिंग है. मैं वैसे भी हैंडसम आदमी हूँ.
इसीलिए तो कह रही हूँ.
आपकी यही चीज
हाँ
जो आपके ला रही है मुझे
बात लो वैसे सीधे बैटल आ जा रही हो किसकी आती है तो मैं पॉलिटिक्स में नए बच्चे हो सीधे हार्डकोर पॉलिटिशियन. ओके, गुड मॉर्निंग टू ऑल ऑफ यू. Jokes apart, so let's recapitulate what we did yesterday. Section 9 recognizes the principle of valuation, that is, the forward tax shall be levied as per value determined under section 15. We touch section 15. 15.1 is very important. Read 15.3. Two subsections of section 15 are very important. 15.1 principle of transaction value, and 15.1 read with IGST Act clearly demarcates that section 15 deals with only valuation of domestic goods or services. Imported goods are not dealt with section 15. And section 15 recognizes a basic principle of accounting standard, that if something is mentioned on the invoice and the parties are unrelated and the consideration is only money, then the value mentioned on the invoice, including discounts, is sacrosanct. Nobody can ever question it. Amazon query or whatever query, but there is no provision for these kind of things. The open market value principle from Rule 27 to Rule 32 comes into play only when section 15.1 conditions are not satisfied. That is, the revenue is able to show, okay buddy, this was not between unrelated parties and you had something else with this deal. Therefore, section 15.1 transaction value mentioned on the invoice cannot be believed. Then you can follow those 4 principles: fair market value, open market value, best judgment or markup pricing. Rule 27 to Rule 32 case various circumstances. The other important section 15.1 was about discounts. Whether it is a discount pre-supply that is mentioned on the invoice or a post-supply through credit notes. This particular section presupposes that discount should be settled at the pre-supply stage, and the supplier will have to establish that discounts were settled before the transaction took place. That is what section 15.1 says: at the time or before delivery, and that is the meaning of and. And is capital, that is the interplay of section 15.1 and 15.2, and recognizes the principle mentioned in subsection 1 following subsection 2. That is why we say in both pre-sale, pre-supply or post-supply transactions, if you want to reduce the output price, you may be called upon to establish that this discounts was agreed to between the parties at a stage prior to or at the time of delivery. And each credit note has to be linked to a tax invoice. No bakwas, if turnover 2%, rejected, you cannot reduce. So even if in a quarter you have issued 1,000 bills, you want to issue a credit note, first satisfy this and then you can issue one credit note linking all the tax invoices. But I will prefer you should have a credit note for each invoice. It's more easy to explain, it's all on computer, so you don't have to do any hard work. You can program it. And each credit note has to be further linked with section 34. Because only section 34 recognizes the principle where a supplier can issue a credit note, reducing its supplies and therefore the taxable value on which he used to pay GST under the circumstances mentioned in 34(1). टैक्स ज़्यादा चार्ज हो गया, प्राइस ज़्यादा चार्ज हो गया और डेफिशिएंसी ऑफ सर्विस और गुड्स रिटर्न. Whenever you are dealing with a case of goods return, documentary evidence must be annexed with that credit note. And as professionals, you must check whether the goods returned has become a part of your inward stocks or not. ये कभी काफी कंपनी में नहीं होता. माल आ गया गोदाम में रख दो यार, लाले लोग ऐसे करते हैं, घरों में बाहर नहीं निकलेंगे. So once you are reducing the output tax liability because goods have returned, based on any kind of credit note, you can reduce your output tax liability only when the recipient who was entitled to claim ITC based on the tax invoice issued by you reverses the input tax credit. Unless he does, you cannot do it. Because if you do it, then government loses one part of tax. And this will nullify the principle of the GST is a revenue neutral concept. This was 15.1. And transaction value, we discussed section 14.1, 14.2 of Custom Act 1962 Railway Tariff Act 75, that it recognizes two valuations. One is transaction value or assessable value as we call in excise, and second, the tariff value fixed. This principle of tariff value fixation is also recognized by subsection 4 of section 15, where government can notify the values as may be prescribed. So once a tariff value is fixed for imported goods or a notification is issued under section 15.4 by the government for domestic goods, then notwithstanding what is the price settled, the GST is payable on notified price. It is like circle rate. Notwithstanding the value between the two of you, if your value is lower than the circle rate, you still pay stamp duty on the circle rate. And that is the principle of section 14 recognized in section 15.4 as we discussed yesterday. Then we came to 15.3, inclusions. The 15.3 starts with if the following shall be included. The word used is shall, and there cannot be any discretion with you. So default rule is anything done before delivery for which price is payable by supplier is a part of transaction value. Anything except the subsidy given by central government or state government, which supplier can reduce. Only supplier can reduce. Otherwise no. So this in general we discuss about 15.1, section 15 dealing with valuation, and we did one or two or three important valuation rules, especially the concept of pure agency. That was extremely important in valuation rules. Otherwise, those 7 specific transactions, foreign currency, travel, wherever you can go through. There's no law in this except a quantification. Other thing yesterday we discussed was that whenever we read law, whichever law you read, you should be able to distinguish between a substantive provision and the machinery provision. Machinery provision must support substantive provision. A machinery provision cannot go beyond a substantive provision. If it goes, it has to be read down. So like section 15(1) is the substantial provision. All subsection 2, 3 and 4 are machinery provision. कि आपको ये मिलेगा, आप ये include करेंगे, नहीं करेंगे. They all support 15(1) transaction value. All subsequent subsection 2, 3, 4, they are in consonance defining section 15(1). कि आप ये निकालेंगे, ये घटाएंगे, ये बढ़ाएंगे, जो भी करेंगे. So whenever we read law, a particular those provisions that fix tax liabilities, our mind should be agile to differentiate between a substantial provision and a machinery provision. Like in VAT, we have input tax study section 9. 9(1) and 9(2) are the only substantial provisions. Other 9 subsections are machinery. ये आप घटाएंगे, ये परसेंटेज घटाएंगे, ये बढ़ा देंगे, ये कर देंगे, वो कर देंगे. But the basic entitlement is input tax credit under section 9(1) read with section 2. If you read section 9, it says subject to section 9(2). If you read 15(1), this is also subject to only one section, but that section is the machinery provision. So before you answer any notice on valuation, you are going to get quite a lot of things that are rotting up in GST department. You have to simply first sit down. Okay, is there any notification under 15(4)? Supposing you say you will not sell steel at a price below 10,000 rupees per ton. You are supplied at 8,000 ton during the relevancy of the notification. You have to pay, there is no other way out. There could be rubber, there could be gehu, there could be sugar. All controlled commodities can have notifications. So you have to simply ask your client or go through yourself, tell your juniors to do it. Is there any notification? Once you rule out the notification, then come on valuation. Okay, who you have sold. Supposing Mr. Verma makes his sale to his son Rahul Verma. Parties are related. So you have to put a question mark that this value can be questioned. Or you did a barter system. कि laptop ले जाओ और मेरे को printer दे दो. For example, laptop was 20,000, printer was 4,000. You got to pay tax on 24,000, not 20,000 rupees. Because this transaction was not for cash. There was a barter. Right? So rule that out and then come to your conclusion. Okay, have you built these materials to other than all customers, other than Mr. Rahul Verma, at the same price? If yes, go ahead and file reply. You know, we have not undervalued anything. But once there is an undervaluation, you have a huge problem. You will have to pay tax interest penalty and the buyer will get no input tax credit. Because after notice, even if you rate a debit note or a supplementary tax advice, it cuts no ice. Whatever you have to do before notice. That is why Delhi High Court says that before you invoke 73, 74, authorities are supposed to give you a pre-consultative notice first, which is not a show cause notice. It's a pre-consult notice that allows you some reason to play if you have done something wrong. But once you get a show cause notice, all that happens after that is your loss. So within this background, we started section 16. So I have recapitulated to you. There are 3 more things you must know before we touch section 16 today. One is the theory of reading down. High courts have the power where they can read down a provision to give meaning to it so that this is workable. Reading down theory as per Supreme Court is only possible if interpretation being placed by the trade or high courts negates the very provision there itself. Therefore, they read it down. For example, in VAT cases, I did a case of health constructions in tribunal and other cases, where we said if you do not dispose of the objection petition within 7 months from date or whatever, it's time barred. And the tribunal led by Bharat Bhushan passed the longest order. They take all order of the request. It went to High Court. High Court said no, we read it down directly, it's not mandatory. They said if we adopt this meaning, the lakhs of cases shall become time barred. For example, section 148A, what did Supreme Court did? They invoked Article 142 because they have the power to invoke. High courts cannot invoke Article 142. They have no power. They invoke power कि 90,000 notice रखी छोड़ दें उनको हम. No, they have to go through it. So Only Supreme Court has power under Constitution to invoke Section 142 and make their order as law of the land under Article 141. So Article 141 is applicable only to judgments passed by Supreme Court. High Court cannot declare a law. High Court can only interpret a law. Whereas Supreme Court has the constitutional power to declare the law, and whatever judgment they have passed, it becomes the law of the land under Article 141. High Courts have no such power. The other principle we did on the second day was the principle of harmonious construction. Harmonious construction is if there is an ambiguity between two or three provisions, courts can give it a harmonious construction. Okay, this means this. Harmonious construction must make the act workable, not unworkable. And this is allowed only in those cases where there is a confusion. There is a little problem in drafting of law. But if the provision is clear, unambiguous, harmonious construction principle is ruled out. We will do this today in case of Innsmouth Supreme Court judgment. We'll discuss today. So after this we touch other principle you must remember. When you read a Supreme Court judgment, you have to first see the top. Is it 2 judges, 3 judges, 5 judges, 7 judges, 9 judges? If there is a latest judgment of 2 judges which is against you, but you have a judgment 5 years passed 5 years ago of 3 judges, the 3 judges judgment will prevail, not 2 judges. Judgment passed by 3 judges, they have no power. You have a favorable 2 judges, unfavorable 3 judges. So as professional you have to go through both. That is what research is meant for. Don't jump, judgment मिल गई, इसको कोई फायदा नहीं. I may have 3 judges, I may have 5 judges as a government counsel, I'll kick you out of the court. So unless you are sure that you have a very strong case on valuation, if you get a pre-consulted notice, advise your client we have to pay. No fun of litigation. Simply because you want to make 1-2 lakh rupees and do jocoim in litigation, no. That is not good advocacy. That is a bad advocacy. You are a bad professional. If knowing the fact, you know that we are going to lose, the law is settled. For example, refund is time barred. Look, can anybody bring any limitation? Don't say हम अपील कर रहे हैं हम देख लेंगे. तुमने नहीं देखना तो क्लाइंट के हमने क्या देखना? हम तो हमारे से तो आ गया, तुम कल मरता आज मरते हमें क्या लेना देना? But as a good professional, no. Advice in sir, there is everything against you. You still want us to do, we will do it. As professional, never ever guarantee anything. Do not get swayed by the currency and malice. That is the worst thing you do to your side, to your character, and to your profession, where you work for rishwats and bribes. I'm sorry to say, I have never done it in my life. I will never do it. Even if heaven fall on me, I have never ever done this. So, when you study law, you study to do this. Know your value. After these classes, your value should go from 10,000 to 30,000 rupees. Because we will all know how to read law, how to interpret law, what to do, what to do. Jack up your price. Rishwat, कि वो ऑडिट तेरा करा दें, कितने पैसे दे दें. That's not our job. If you do it, think it over. Easy money, but this affects your character. This affects your psyche. Continue to study. अगर 4 दिन आप मेरे से इंसान को झेल सकते हो, आप खुद तो कितना पढ़ सकते हो आप? मेरे को तो झेलना है. I speak very fast. My thought process is very quick. So if you can jello me and leave everything and come here at 9:45, force me also to come at 9:45, then you can do wonders with your life. As younger background, this is your time. हमारा टाइम नहीं है, हमने जो करना कर दिया है. We have to prove nothing. It's younger time. Don't get swayed that Mr. Verma comes in Mercedes, so we should also have Mercedes. You get Mercedes when you get it. Earn it. Don't bother कि वो उसकी सहेली ने अब ये पूजा की, उसने वो डायमंड पहन किया थी, मैं भी पहन के कहाँ से लाओगे डायमंड? आप चोरी करोगे क्या? You are you. Full stop. Love yourself with beautiful people, but do not get into. Don't bring such money at home. It will never ever help your family. I guarantee you that. I've seen people going through miserable lives in our bar because they did whole life listening only. उस पैसे को कोई फायदा नहीं. आप पढ़ाई करो, जितनी पढ़ाई कर सकते हो. And we will have endless sessions of each topic also. I do only this nowadays. I hardly work. I don't travel anymore. But that's my experience. I'm giving it to you. You work hard. Compliance, return when business, just throw it out. This is not a investor to file returns. I'm sorry. It's not your job. It's a job from an accountant. पर आपको कुछ करना नहीं है रिटर्न में. सबको तो बनाया आता है ना. To get into opinions, discuss the client profile. Start this slow. प्रोफाइल करो ना. क्लाइंट को आप डिस्कस का प्रोफाइल डिस्कस करो. एक क्लाइंट का हमने प्रोफाइल डिस्कस कर लिया तो आपको उसकी सारी प्रॉब्लम बताया जो वो धंधा करता है. Make a note. Keep in your file. If this man does this, and these are the possible problems he can have. तो अगर आपके 50 क्लाइंट हैं, 100 क्लाइंट हैं, कितने दिन लगेंगे? 100 दिन 3 महीने में सारा बन जाएगा. But start moving in this direction. Now onward, at least, it's number 2 in life. God bless you. So we touched section 16. We have done the definition of input. Uda, what is input? Input relates to only goods. The word used is input, not inputs. Then with that input tax, the tax shown by the supplier on tax invoice is input tax. Input tax credit, which you get as per section 16. Input service is defined separately. All these you get if you buy the goods or services or both in the course or furtherance of business. So if anything you acquire other than for business or is furtherance of business, you are not entitled to input tax credit, including. You don't have to read section 16 IGST Act in isolation of section 16 of CGST Act. So we read section 20. Yesterday we did section 20. All those 23 items of CGST Act are applicable to IGST Act also, including input tax credit. So even to claim input tax credit for exports, you still have to ensure that these goods are purchased in the course or furtherance of business, that is export of goods. If the purchase of anything, including capital goods, is unrelated to what you've exported, then zero rating doesn't help you. Except when goods are tax-free. In that case, there are some judgments because tax-free goods also, law itself permits it. You will get input tax credit. Provided again, the principle remains those goods were which you purchased where you want to claim refund of input tax credit in cash in 1954, they must do what you have manufactured and exported. So in the course of business is the main activity. The furtherance of business is incidental or ancillary activity. But these must relate to the principal business activity. Only then it is furtherance of business. Right? So we did section 16.1. 16.1 we did yesterday. Input tax credit is available only to registered taxpayer. Not taxable person, not required to be registered person, only registered taxpayer. Subject to section 18, whatever 30 days period is allowed to claim input tax credit. We will discuss this today in brief. Second, you must procure goods or services or both. That is 16.1 is applicable to all the goods or services or both. You have to be very careful when you read this. Whether it's applicable to goods or services or both, this is applicable to goods, services or both. And you must have a tax invoice in your possession. Many people say what 2A, 2B, 2B होता है वो confirm होगा तो क्या होगा? No. 2A, 2B is not a part of section 16.1. It's an amendment in 2019. It's given as an addenda. 16.1 still remains. You must have tax invoice. Otherwise, all transactions which are colluded, they need not have tax invoices. तो हमारा 2B में confirm हो गया. Then what? How does it matter? You must have a tax invoice. And tax invoice, there is no pro forma prescribed under the Act. In section 31, which says that the tax invoice shall have the following particulars. Tax invoice must have those particulars. And we will go back to section 2, subsection clause 1 or 2, definition of delivery address. So whatever delivery address you have declared to the authorities, your tax invoice must have those addresses only, not any other address. So whatever delivery address you have notified to the authorities in terms of your section 22 requirements, read the section 2, you have to have that only. Authorized signatory. I see many invoices which are unsigned. Law does not recognize any document which is not signed. You will have, this is not a lapse of procedure. It's a substantial lapse. That is your PN can issue an invoice. So whether the signature are digital or physical, it should be signed by authorized person only, not boogie-baji. Somebody has to pinpoint, they'll reject all your invoices. Go wherever you have to go.
Sir, there was also a discussion which happened over the question that the invoice should be signed by the authorized signatory who is also authorized on.
Yes, signatory.
But sir, in most of the cases where there are the ticket size of the business is too big, or the delivery centers are too much, therein it is not being followed.
It is just a question of time. Once you get caught. I remember Modbird excise gate passes which were rejected on this ground, and Supreme Court confirmed rejection. For example, you have a large company, you have 100 bank accounts.
Yes.
So can anybody send the check? Check can go back. This is more than a check, it can never go back. It's a money in hand, you deduct at source. You don't wait for a bank check realization. So therefore, as far as possible, we should have a clients, okay, buddy, these are to be signed by authorized signatory which are declared in GST portal. कल को जब investigation होते हैं, जब झगड़े होते हैं, unless the law permits, I don't know whether a rule permits this kind of a thing is not unsigned. In my opinion, this is not a lapse of procedure. It's a substantial lapse. Your invoice doesn't have particular section 31. It has a wrong GST number. It doesn't have a GST number of the purchaser. Your address is wrongly mentioned. You do not mention the full HSN. You do not mention the item description. Code लिखते हैं, code 104. बस. Code is the product. It's not sold as code. So even if invoice runs into 20 pages, you must write 20 pages. That is the requirement of law. क्या विषय कुछ है? इसकी फेवर में कुछ है कहीं?
When the word is written authorized representative, we can take help of that, and we can authorize someone from our own company and make a document on it and
No, but supposing it's not on GST portal, then will it make any difference? I'm asking you. I am not aware of
But he is saying authorized representative, but that is authorized signatory.
I'm talking about the when board is someone who is authorized on the board. Say we have 5 partners in the firm or a director. We are authorized there on the GST portal, and because what Rahul has said that we and we can't sign all the invoices. Either it can be a digital signature of that person, and when it can be digitally signed, then the board can authorize someone to sign.
it. How will authorities know? Supposing they catch you, then you will carry the board resolution there to show to them. I don't think it's allowed.
This kind of issue words also.
I don't think it can be allowed. See, it is not a matter of procedure. You are signing a document which entitles the beneficiary to claim money of tax which is mentioned on tax invoice, and is entitled to take IFRS 16(1) into the electronic credit ledger. So if it's unauthorized in terms of law, that's why I am a serious provision in rules. I don't know. There is one yes, but I will say this is not a procedural lapse. You may be right that tomorrow when you have a question, you can show board resolution, and you say this is listed in our इसको फाइल करना आपने कर रखा है. That's a post facto stuff. Dual indication. Any document, Abhishek, that requires interpretation should never be made in tax laws. Never ever make a document that can be subjected to an interpretation. It will go against you. Why will revenue officer bother about you? तो मेरे से होगा मैं तो कभी नहीं दूंगा. Never. If you could not make a tax invoice correctly based on passing on government money to the recipient, फिर बाकी किताबों में आपके क्या क्या होगा? कहाँ देखेंगे आप? Supposing in Section 70 proceedings, they record a statement which is not authorized. Supreme Court that question. It was the duty of the revenue officer to take a statement of authorized person. चपरासी स्टेटमेंट में क्या सर्च हो सकती है? करते हैं. But they are questioned. The same logic should apply in reverse also. No? So, it's a, anyway, since you are an author, keep looking into it. If there is a solution to it, we would like to know. I am not aware of it.
Sir, the cookie warner Martin investor में allowed नहीं है फिर ये?
नहीं. कैश
यार तुमने वही बात की कि मेरी रिटर्न भर दो. हमारे बाहर में लोग करते हैं. मिस्टर डोगरा मेरे दोस्त हैं, सीनियर लॉयर है. मैं कहा ये क्या कर रहे हो आप? कैसे रिटर्न भर रहे हैं? रिटर्न क्या थी? पर्ची आई कि इतनी सेल है, 5% है, 2% है, रिटर्न कर दी. वो साइन भी खुद ही कर दी. Tomorrow you will say that the return you file can be signed by anybody. Then who will be arrested? If a return cannot be signed by person other than authorized person, how could you sign a tax invoice?
जो मैं हमारी पटेल होती है उससे हमें पता नहीं कि उसका बंदा कौन है जो साइन किए नहीं किए उससे कैसे चेक करेंगे?
वो I am saying when you issue, it is for him to bother what he is doing.
हम उसको इस आईडी से मिल जाएगा.
And if you ask me, I will जो आप KYC करते हैं सप्लायर का, हम अपने लोगों से करवाते हैं, जो हम नया एडवाइस करते हैं, हम उनका मॉडल बनाते हैं. ये पहली रिक्वायरमेंट है कि आपका अगर सिग्नेटरी कौन कौन है. हम उनके बिना कोई इन्वेस्ट नहीं लेंगे.
तो कहेगी
Somebody has to sit down in your office. कितना काम है? किसी भी कंपनी ब्रांड पे कितने इन्वेस्ट रोज के आते हैं? 15, 20, 25, 50 आने वाले.
ठीक है.
कितना टाइम लगता है चेक करने में?
हमें नहीं पता जैसे साइन किया उसका बंदा है कि नहीं हो क्या
तो उसे KYC करो, उसे लो ना कौन ऑथराइज्ड है. जब we want to play safe, tomorrow we don't want to question. अब जितने ये केस चल रहे हैं सर्कुलर ट्रेडिंग, ये तो झगड़े हैं. वो कहते हैं हमने तो लाइफ इश्यू नहीं किया जी. आपने अपने कंप्यूटर का पासवर्ड अकाउंट में दे दिया, वो तो सारा काम कर दिया. How will you deny? Document don't tell lie. So whenever you raise an indirect tax law, it's my experience of 40 years. 90% is your documents. आप IC से ले लो, E1 से ले लो, ऑडिट ले लो, ये आपकी रिटर्नें ले लो, 3B ले लो, 2A, 2B जो भी करते हैं आप, डॉक्यूमेंट से और किससे कौन सा कानून है? मतलब which law are you studying for this? Nothing. टैली आपको कोई बकवास फिगर देता आगे बढ़ देते बिना देखे. टैली guys should be killed. The kind of system they have. It doesn't warn you at all. It doesn't check anything. That is why the thing is forensic audit. I've done a huge study on forensic audit. बाहर के जो अमेरिका में स्टडी होती है, I work for some American company forensic audit in GST law in India. वो सारे डॉक्यूमेंट आपके कंप्यूटर में फीड कर देते हैं. डॉक्यूमेंट चेक ऑटोमेटिकली. आपका अच्छा वो ठीक है नहीं, साइन ठीक है नहीं, डिस्क्रिप्शन ठीक है नहीं, टैक्स ठीक है नहीं, वैल्यू ठीक है नहीं. लेकिन हमारे यहाँ भी वो फैसिलिटी है नहीं. अगले 10 साल आएगी भी नहीं GST में. लेकिन आप EY, KPMG, डेवलप में जाओ, और उनकी पूरी टीम है फोरेंसिक ऑडिट, उनके पास सिस्टम है. That is why they rule.
But as a tax professional, we have to advise our
Yes.
clients.
That's
He
why
has to take care.
you have to do.
हाँ.
कि बड़ी ये तेरा सारा गलत है, कल को तू मरेगा, हाँ we are not responsible. And always communicate with your client. डरो मत, क्यों भाग जाएगा, भागने दो ना. ये come back to you, pay you double. को बोले जी हमने आपके डॉक्यूमेंट देखे, डॉक्यूमेंट आपके गलत है. आपके टैक्स इनवॉइस में एक्शन नहीं है, ये नहीं है, वो नहीं है, उसको सारे ईमेल भेजो. अगर नहीं भेजोगे तो यू आर नॉट डूइंग योर जॉब. आप आए रिटर्न में उसे 5,000 रुपये जेब में डाले, आपने ठीक है सर देख लेंगे. क्या देखोगे बाद में? 5,000 के 10,000 लोग. तो बोलो सर एक दिन में आपको डॉक्यूमेंट देखना है, वी विल चार्ज यू. एंड आई कैन टेल यू एवरी गुड क्लाइंट शैल पे यू. आई डोंट सी एनी क्लाइंट हु विल रिफ्यूज टू पे यू कि आप हमारे डॉक्यूमेंट चेक करके हमें एडवाइस करो, हम आपको पैसे नहीं देंगे. बट इंक्रीज योर वैल्यू. So 16.1 we said, well, you must have tax invoice. We were touching 16.2. Yesterday we read 16.2. So let's start 16.2 today. I think it's a price.
Yes.
It's a price.
Fully authorized.
Full yes. No, it's a price. Invoice should be physically with you, original, not email. But there is a sense, if you go to section 2, there is a definition of document. Okay, let us see whether the email invoices can be covered in that. Good question, thank you. 241. Document. If tax invoice is a document, Abhishek, is it a document? Tax invoice is a document? Document, written or printed record of any sort and electronic record defined in clause T of section 2. So if section 2 T of IT Act authorizes, email invoice can be a tax invoice in your position.
It should be a PDF format and digital format.
Then it can be, because इस एक्ट में डॉक्यूमेंट की डेफिनेशन है और किसी टैक्स लॉ में डॉक्यूमेंट की डेफिनेशन नहीं है, इसमें है, राइट?
So but when we link it with electronic, you said that वो जो कई बार invoice आते हैं और वो एक बार sign करके वो copy paste कर रहे हैं, that is not a valid invoice.
What is copy paste? I didn't get it. What is copy paste?
कई बार क्या होता है, some people sign once और
यार तू लड़की को जरा बोलेगा फिर हमें समझ जाते हैं, जोर से बोल यार, ऑथर है,
सर वो-
डर मत, वैसे मत डर, मैं कुछ नहीं मारूंगा तेरे को, जोर से बोल।
तो कई बार ऐसे इनवॉइस भी देखे
अब देखा ना?
पीडीएफ में आते हैं कि एक बार साइन किसी ने फिजिकली मार लिया और उसी को वो कॉपी पेस्ट करके वर्ड पर फिर उसको पीडीएफ करके
No, no.
दैट इज नॉट एक्सेप्टेबल.
Sir, I tell you what is the talking. Sir, normally what happens, there are a lot of documents which are issued by say universities or anything. It is a normal signature which is printed on the paper only, and it is sent either with any kind of, but it is not happening on the invoices. It is only happening on other official documents.
But in that case, if you do, supposing you have a PDF blank invoice format, signed by digital by the press creator, then why can't they issue 100 invoices on the same format? Where is the bar?
सर डिजिटल में तो मना नहीं है, फिर डिजिटली साइन दैट इज ओके, बट आई हैव सीन सर्टेन इनवॉइसेस
सर मैनुअल साइन
जहां पर साइन को कॉपी पेस्ट करते हैं,
वो साइन को
क्रॉप करके
क्रॉप करके करते हैं.
कॉपी पेस्ट करके
ये सब तुम्हारे सीए एडवाइस करते हैं, मेरे को कुछ नहीं पता।
हर बार हमें ब्लेम मत करो. Sir, yesterday also you said 400 chartered accountants were.
I did.
Sir, sir, it is 400 CA and CS. You forgot CS.
वैसे पूनम स्मार्ट बनने के लिए बच्चे नहीं आप आओगे नहीं क्लास में, स्मार्ट बन रहे हो, नहीं, कल भी नहीं आया, कल भी नहीं आया। Okay, 16.2. So remember, we did what's the meaning of notwithstanding clause on the first day itself. Whenever a sentence starts with notwithstanding, you must raise your eyebrows. It means something very, very strong in law. Notwithstanding, we also call it a non-obstante clause, technically in Greek language. This means wherever this notwithstanding word is used, it overpowers all other things which are mentioned there. That is, what is written in a notwithstanding section, chapter or subsection or subclause, it shall overpower all other provisions. The effect of this provision shall prevail. Are we clear? So 16.1 dealt with when you are entitled to input tax credit, as if about yesterday we were debating. We'll develop it now before we go to 16.2. What is entitlement? Entitlement is if you satisfy certain conditions, then you shall be entitled to take the benefit of what you have done. If you read 16.1, it says subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed. So 16.2 says tax invoice, etc., etc., etc. These are conditions prescribed. The word entitle and take can be used interchangeably. That is, by the tax invoice and by the condition that you purchase these goods, services or both in the course of furtherance of business, you have become entitled to take input tax credit. Therefore, this can be transferred to your electronic credit ledger. It gives you no other right. Entitlement authorizes you to take it in the document prescribed. Now supposing in your books of accounts you have taken purchase ITC separate account, आपने इसका credit ले लिया. Your books have no value in GST because it is controlled through electronic credit ledger or cash ledger. You cannot, your books don't authorize anything like that. They have no value for GST purpose. So once we say entitle and take, the right is limited to if you are being eligible to take the credit or get entitled to take the credit in electronic credit ledger. The second word is availment. Availment is if you go a step further. Okay, now you can avail this. That is, this money can be made available to you to utilize this to set off your output tax liability. This is a right to avail. The third word is utilization. Avail and utilization, there is a difference in GST as it was in service tax or as with excise tax. Avail means, and now this money is available to you. Utilization is as per law authorized in section 29. उसी मैनर में आपको यूटिलाइज करना है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल आपको अपील के पैसे जमा कराने हैं तो इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट नॉट अवेलेबल टू यू हैव अवेल्ड इट बट यू कैन नॉट यूटिलाइज इट. यू हैव टू पे कैश. जजमेंट का थ्योरी पुरानी हो गई आपके टैक्स पर यूज कर सकते हैं कैश. वी विल डिस्कस दिस. एक्ट में अप्लाई शुरू में लेते हैं, आप नहीं लेते. नाउ दे आस्क यू हैव एनी कंट्री टू इट.
I'll share, but I'm not carrying that.
Okay. Okay, one example. Wherever you have to pay cash, for example, RCM, can you utilize the credit? You have availed it, but you cannot utilize it. So there is a difference between taking, satisfy condition, take your credit ledger. Avail is available to you. You have availed it now. Utilization is subject to law. Right? Credit ledger. Cash ledger, there is no restriction. That's your money. And whatever refund is given to you, where there is a 2-year limitation, that is only for electronic credit ledger. For cash ledger, there is no limitation. It's your money. You shelled out from your pocket. Like you have to claim TDS, there is no limitation. But if you have to claim unutilized input tax credit, that is only in electronic credit ledger. Are we clear? So remember the word take, entitlement can be used interchangeably. Avail is, and now this money is available to you. Law says you can use it. But utilization is a step beyond availment. It says that now you can utilize subject to these conditions. What our law is laid down. Right? Let's go to 16.2. Notwithstanding anything contained in this section. So this non-obstante clause is applicable only to section 16. In other words, if there is anything contrary in other section, this clause shall not overpower this. For example, 73-74. 16.2 cannot overpower 73-74. That is, you may satisfy all 16.2 conditions. They say there is a fraud. Circular trading, चोर है सारे सारे. Now you cannot jump. 16(2) में लिखा है. Non-obstante clause है. Because they say it's applicable only to this section. Supposing instead of statutory written anything contrary in the act, then this would have become all pervasive. It will cover the entire act. But since this non-obstante clause, notwithstanding clause is restricted to this section 16 only, so the scope is very restricted. अगर इस सेक्शन में कुछ और कंट्रेरी लिखा है, अगर ये satisfy condition satisfy करते हैं, आपको इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट मिलेगा. Let's go to further, spend some more time on this. No registered person. One more negative word. No registered person, because 16(1) uses the word registered person. Therefore, only registered person entitled to claim input tax credit shall be entitled 16.1 uses the word entitled, 16.2 also uses the word entitled. So they are not at availment at all. When you go further 16.4, I'll tell you what is the interplay of 16.2 and 16.4. They are still at the word entitled. कि जो 16.1 में आपने अपने इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर में लेना है, it is subject to 16.2. Notwithstanding anything contained in this section, no registered person shall be entitled to take credit. So that is the interrelation of what entitled in 16.1 and 16.2 shall be entitled to the credit of any input tax. Input tax 5 तरह का है. We did the definition yesterday. Any input tax credit you cannot take. And through section 20, this also applicable to IGST Act also and also Cess Act. In respect of any supply of goods or services or both to him, again negative word unless. So you have a notwithstanding in one line, same line you have no, now you have unless. Unless means that the conditions following after unless have to be strictly satisfied. Now remember, it's a concessional provision. It shall be strict, it shall be construed strictly. If you deviate one or full stop. If you remember the dispute about transitional credit, section 140, all high courts giving different judgments. Supreme Court staying brand equity, high court, and they have not bothered to look into this at present. It was only on this ground. Okay, whether the limitation mentioned in section amended through Finance Act 2020 is applicable retrospectively. पैसा था, सब कुछ ठीक था, आपने लिमिटेशन में टाइम नहीं पाया, क्लेम नहीं किया. ऐसे भारतीय एयरटेल में हुआ, वे सुप्रीम कोर्ट has already given their mind कि हम limitation will be sacrosanct, we will not give you relief. Now imagine Supreme Court tomorrow, they reverse brand equity. Delhi High Court judgment. Delhi High Court went a huge step further till limitation act की 3 साल इसमें लगेगी. That was a horrible interpretation of law. इसने भी किया. But taxation में limitation law नहीं ला सकते अब unless the limitation act is invoked.
But sir, the grounds for the Tran-1 issues was basically on the technical glitches, even though it
That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
and the
अगर ये limitation act 3 साल में होता है, ये judgment stay नहीं होती. I was in the court on that day when this was heard. Judge said, what is this limitation act? Limitation act tax पे लागू होता है. Once a statute is a self-contained code, unless an act is adopted by reference into the parent act, you cannot go to parent act. You have General Policies Act. Is there something is not defined? Then yes. But limitation act को लाना, वो तो फिर बहुत ज़्यादा हो गया वहाँ पर. But I can tell you, my view is brand equity shall be reversed by Supreme Court. Supposing tomorrow brand equity is reversed, what happens to all those who have claimed transitional input tax credit based on a jurisdictional high court ruling? No, they want to reverse. Unless Supreme Court invokes 142 and say limitation will not be applicable, you will still follow 73 and 74. Recovery is only 73, 74. There is no other provision to recover. So unless Supreme Court says like 148A, that the limitation shall be ignored as formal limitation available to authorities, the authorities will have to strictly comply with the limitation of 73, 70, only 73. There is no fraud. वो 3 साल तो खत्म हो चुके. Everything is over. So let's wait. How does Supreme Court give an interpretation of this? So notwithstanding anything contained in this section, no registered person shall be entitled to take credit in respect of any supply of goods or services unless, what conditions are there? He is in possession. So we have clarified today through this gentleman that email invoice can be a document, and Abhishek confirms that tax invoice is a document. I'm not about sure because I have never examined this issue. But if it's an invoice, then your email invoices should be in your possession when you take credit. Now, when we say a concession has to be speak conclusively, all conditions mentioned herein must be satisfied before you get entitled to this. Now, supposing आपका 2A 2B में आ गया, इनवाइस नहीं है आपके पास, तो क्या करेंगे? Does it violate this condition? Right? That means 2 over 2 have no function. Because if law says he's in possession and you don't have an invoice with you, तो आपको input tax credit कैसे मिले? These are grey areas of law. This is where harmonious construction will be done by courts. अगर आपने 2 over 2 बनाया पोर्टल पर confirmation और non confirmation, अगर उसके पास invoice नहीं है, will you deny input tax credit? But we as professionals will say that you must have invoice. We are not courts, so we don't give interpretations, right? The details of the invoice or debit note referred to in clause A has been furnished by the supplier in the statement of outward supply, and such details have been communicated to the recipient for such invoice or debit note in the manner specified in section 37, 2A to B. I need not, everybody knows it. He has received the goods or services or both. Now this is a huge thing. Non-panga, I think I agree with this condition as a lawyer. After all, you are getting a benefit of 28% of gross value, and you say that there should be no conditions, no way. Notwithstanding, tax knows no consequences may be adverse or for against the revenue or in favor of revenue. Law has to be read, and this is a good condition. The only thing is, reason to prove is not provided in the act. How do we prove it? Yesterday we were discussing. Now, you have tax invoice, you have 2 over 2 with information. सेक्शन 37 के दोनों का स्टेटमेंट आपके फेवर में है. अब वो कहता है जी आपके गुड्स कैसे आते बताओ, गुड्स कैसे आए.
ई-वे बिल है, जीआर है.
No meaning. All these documents are collateral evidence in support of a proof. I can throw it out. ये जितने लोग पकड़ेंगे इनके पास सब कुछ है.
सिर्फ पकड़े जाने वाले लोगों की बात नहीं कर रहे हैं. We don't speak about the short details.
उनके भी लॉ तो एक है ना. Tax is not according to conduct of the party. Tax is according to law. चोर थे, हम तो नहीं कह रहे वो चोर है, किसी कोर्ट ने चोर तो नहीं बोला उनको अभी. अभी जेल में डाला उनके वे लोग.
जिनकी आप बात कर रहे हो वो मूवमेंट नहीं प्रूव कर पाए. वो मूवमेंट नहीं प्रूव कर पाए.
Now the question is,
उनके पास ई-वे बिल था, टैक्स इनवॉइस था, but they don't have the proof for movement of goods.
this condition does not require movement of goods.
That's
This condition does not require movement of goods. Received is a much bigger word than the movement of goods. Received is physical receipt. Movement, when you talk of section 3 of central sales tax, वहाँ movement word था.
सर recipient अगर agree करता है तो
उसने मान लिया.
वो मैं नहीं बता सकता, उसी की डिस्कस कर रहे हैं हम.
सर अगर recipient accept करता है कि he has received the material from supplier.
Now supposing there is an investigation. Listen. We are going to discuss a Supreme Court judgment on this today, on this same issue appropriate today. Supposing Dr. Rahul Kakkar claims input tax credit of 10 crore rupees. He is raided by GST authorities. मैं हीरो ऑफ प्रूफ हो गया सर. सारी दुनिया तुम्हारे पीछे लगी कैसे प्रूफ किया.
जीएसटी के अंदर रजिस्टर्ड उसमें डरा रहे हो आप.
Now supposing GST people raid his office and they say 10 करोड़ रुपए क्या है. वो कहते हैं कि हमने तो मिस्टर से सप्लाई दी. इज ए नॉन लॉयर, इज बिजनेस आल्सो. हमने से बिजनेस किया. तो पुलिस वर्मा के पोर्टल में जाती है, उसके सारे रेड फ्लैग्स हैं. चोर है वर्मा का. राइट? दे गो थ्रू मिस्टर वर्मा. उन्होंने कहाँ से खरीदा था? If you are also a trader, they go to third party. This is what they do basically. वो कहते हैं वहाँ भी red flags हैं, सारे चोर हैं. Now what is the concept of GST? GST for the government is always revenue neutral. That is, whatever tax has been deposited with the government can pass on to you as an input tax credit. Once you invoke 16(1) and 16(2), you become a beneficiary of the tax amount mentioned in the tax invoice. And the beneficiary must be qualified. That is the catch here. Now you might say, सब देखो ई-वे बिल है, उसकी स्टैंप लगी है, मेरा अकाउंट रिकंसिलिएशन हम सब करते हैं, उसकी पेमेंट बाय बैंक है, मेरे स्टॉक लेटर में मेंशन्ड है, मैंने उसका माल बना के बेचा है. इससे ज़्यादा प्रूफ कुछ है. But they say कि you would have never ever received the goods. आपने गुड्स नंबर 2 में किसके माल बनाया, या माल आपको नहीं मिला. So the very fact when you show कि मैंने माल बना के बेचा है, they are not denying this. तो बेचा आपने टैक्स दिया. Now what you have to prove is कि whether in manufacturing this material, did you use the material sold supplied by Mr. Verma to Dr. Rahul Kakkar? You have to prove this. That is the meaning of word received here. He is a singular word. He has received the goods or services of both. They cannot deny the fact कि आपने माल बनाया बेचा टैक्स दिया. वो कहते हैं ये सारा माल आपने नंबर 2 में लिया है कारीबाजी से तिलक बाजार से सिर्फ इनपुट टैक्स स्ट्रेटजी आपने इनवाइस दिया. That is the difference between a fake invoice and invoice trading. दोनों फेक कैटेगरी में आते हैं. So now to avoid this kind of anomaly in your account, how do we do it? There is no mechanism provided in the Act, and this is the only ground where perhaps Supreme Court may intervene. But once there are allegations, and remember these allegations are of fact, High Court, Supreme Court cannot go into it. They have no power. They have no authority to go into facts. You can only raise a substantial question of law, not question of law, but substantial question of law before the High Court or Supreme Court. Now, supposing you are ruling by tribunal, if these facts are correct, can you go anywhere? Facts. You may start jumping on law and nothing, कुछ नहीं होगा. इन स्विफ्ट के केस में सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने पंजाब हरियाणा हाई कोर्ट के खिलाफ स्टिकर पास किया. How did you go into the question of fact? Who are you? It was the authority was seized that the authorities have done it. So once you get caught on this third condition, it is recipient. It may be very wrong, illegal on the part of lawmakers. Why should buyer prove? But the fact is, you are claiming this money. You have to prove. So if you were dealing with a man of straw, आपको पता ही नहीं कौन लोग थे. अब सुनील कह रहा मेरे पास ये बिल है. अब कौन से बंदे को किसका नाम बताओ किसे डील कर रहे थे? हाँ सर वो उनका कोई वर्मा साहब का ये आता था बीरू सिंह. हम तो उससे डील करते. Well, you were dealing with a figure for transaction was crores. प्रिंस प्लास्टिक का केस था ST1 का दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट में राजेश माना साहब ने किया था. उसने हाई कोर्ट ने बोला था if you are dealing with a man of straw, get ready to face consequences. Then it was dismissed. So once you are dealing with a question of fact, don't mix this with law. Again, law is 5%. Law clear है. It's not my baby. हम लोग जंप करते हैं राइज इंडिया लगा देंगे. कैसे लगा देंगे राइज इंडिया? राइज इंडिया only says 92G को इंटरप्रेट करते हुए if the supplier has not paid tax, you are not responsible. It's not a question you have paid tax or not. They are doubting the very transaction you have entered into. Tax comes later. Right? हम कहते हैं हमारे पास सी फॉर्म है, देखो जी कंसेशन नहीं दे रहे. अरे सी फॉर्म सेंट्रल सेल के बाद आएगा ना. अगर तेरी वो सेंट्रल सेल ही डाउट कर रहे, सी फॉर्म में नो वैल्यू, इज अ पीस ऑफ पेपर. थ्रो इट आउट. So once they doubt this transaction, you had the invoice without delivery of goods or services or both, they are questioning the very veracity, very foundation of your transaction. If you satisfy this and supplier has not paid tax, then arising they will come into play.
That's the idea. What to suggest to our tech client?
अब करेंगे. मैं कोई परवान थोड़ा. यहाँ बड़े बड़े सबको आता है law. We are interacting it. I am only laying down a legal proposition. So this, he has received the goods or services or both. This is one of the onerous conditions in 16.2. Now, why are we saying this? 16.1 is the substantial provision that gives you entitlement to claim input tax credit if you buy the goods for or services or both in the course of further of business, and if you are a registered person. 16.2 qualifies it. It makes it more stringent upon you that before you get entitled to take credit in your electronic credit ledger, satisfy the following conditions. That is the function of 16.2. It is 16.3 or 16.4. And notwithstanding and no, unless there are three seriously negative words that could be used by lawmakers to make it sure that we understand what is the implication of 16.2. So when you say he has received goods or supply or services or both, it doesn't mean whether supplier has paid tax or not. आपके पास ई-वे बिल है या नहीं, आपकी बैंक पेमेंट है या नहीं, सब कुछ ठीक है आपका. This is the transaction never took place. Goods were never delivered to you. Therefore, you could have never received. Supposing they place a report on record कि जहाँ से उसका नंबर था वहाँ कभी ये फर्म चली ही नहीं थी, क्या करेंगे आप? And they record the statement section 70 आप किस बंदे से डील कर रहे थे, आपको पता नहीं, तो चोरी के बिल ले रखे हैं आपने. So simply having a tax invoice will not entitle you to take credit in your electronic credit ledger and then avail and utilize it. That is why the difference between entitlement, availment, utilization. A tax invoice can entitle you. Take electronic credit ledger. Then satisfy 16(2), then comes availment and section 49 utilization. 16(1) doesn't deal with utilization at all. It deals with when can you take input tax credit. 16 में utilization word नहीं है. It's only entitled to take. So 16(2), this third condition is very onerous. It's very difficult to lay down any documentation as a lawyer, whatever little I know about law. It's very difficult to lay down any mechanism. How do you prove? Videographies can be fake, planted, right? Witnesses, आपके लोगों के sign, account reconciliation, no. You have to deal with people who have a good track record. That is the only solution. If you're buying invoices, you know you are buying invoices. You get one. आपके पास KYC कर सकते हैं, उसका पैन कार्ड ले सकते हैं जनरल, उसका बैंक डिटेल ले सकते हैं, उसका एड्रेस प्रूफ ले सकते हैं, उसकी जहाँ दुकान है उसकी वहाँ विजिट करा के रिपोर्ट लगवा सकते हैं इंडिपेंडेंट. कुछ ऐसी चीजें आपके पास रखें, लेकिन अगेन these are only collateral evidences. This is not a primary evidence that proves a case beyond doubt. You are still at the same thing. If your transaction is doubted, there is no question of you getting input tax credit. So what the revenue is doing, and the way we interpret in our circles, कि यार सब कुछ हमारे पास है, no, they are not saying you don't have, you have everything. वो कहते हैं transaction ये हुई नहीं, कि goods were never delivered to you, there is no transaction taken place. उनके पास पूरा रिकॉर्ड है. Court don't give you bail, you get arrested, remain in jail for 6 months, 7 months, 1 year. Why? The simple reason is you are unable to prove that goods or both were delivered to you. That is the meaning of he has received. Let's go next.
Sir, he told कि वो जो सिस्टम होता है फ्लैश चेक करते हैं, रेड फ्लैग है, जो पीछे रेड फ्लैग है, तो हमें पता सकता है कैसे कि कैसे.
They have a system OIA.
तो फिर
वो सॉफ्टवेयर सिस्टम आपके लिए नहीं है, उनके लिए.
दुकान से
ये रेड उनके बेस पे होती है. कोई भी अफसर को मुंह उठा के आपके दफ्तर नहीं आ सकता. This is put up to the additional director who authorizes raid. They have to have sufficient proof. आज भी देखो, कल इस तरह मैंने बोला इनकम टैक्स में सारे अफसरों के खिलाफ एक्शन लो, ये क्या हाई पिच नोटिस देखते रहते. Government is also concerned. But why is not government coming up with a statement? Because all the cases are full proof they have. कोर्ट ने बेल नहीं दी उनको, बड़ी बड़ी कंपनियां हैं. That's why you have settlement commission. Supposing all this you admit, you Mr. Verma says go to settlement commission. Why is he going to settlement commission? Agreeing to pay tax. हाँ बिल्कुल साफ थे. To buy peace, हम लिखते हैं to buy peace. अच्छा 5 करोड़ रुपए peace buy करेंगे तेरे हुआ. So then there are problems. So this condition is very serious. Wherever it's very simple. As a professional, when you file the return, I have never seen the return, so don't ask me return for them. मैंने देखा भी नहीं कभी आज तक. उसका टैली का उसका जो माल परचेज किसके स्टेटमेंट देगा. अगर उसकी एवरेज इनवॉइस 10,000 है, you have 10 bills of 1 lakh. These are bogus bills. It's my experience. If you have 100 bills, his average bill is 10,000, and you have 10 bills of 1 lakh above. Must question only those bills. What are these bills show us? You come to know कि आपके क्लाइंट ने क्या किया. There's no business. The average cannot go 10 times in a particular purchase. This is not a very good business behavior. So you have to spend time again. If you want to serve your client legitimately and do good to him and do good to your pocket as well, के लिए काम करो। कितने इनवॉइस होंगे? सॉफ्टवेयर मिलते हैं, वो आपको बता देंगे ये इनवॉइस 10 लाख के ऊपर के, 1 लाख के ऊपर, आपको उनको पूछना है, बाकी नहीं। And I can tell you, out of 100 cases, 99% these bills will be bogus. No customer shows this behavior कि आप 10 बिल 10,000 रुपए के, 11वें बिल 5 लाख रुपए का। अचानक कितना बड़ा आदमी कैसे हो गया वो? From high value transaction, just look into. Next, subject to provisions of section 41, the tax charged in respect of such supply has been actually paid to the government, either in cash or through input. अब इसमें भी बहुत झगड़ा है। हम कहते हैं तो उसने सप्लायर ने इनपुट टैक्स एडजस्ट कर दिया, तो क्या प्रॉब्लम है? कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, लॉ में लिखा है एक्चुअली पेड मींस व्हाट, इन कैश और थ्रू एडजस्टमेंट ऑफ इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट। बट दिस will again come into play. With a harmonious construction with 16.2, it means two things, only two things. Prove receipt of goods or services, and if you are able to prove, that means supplier has supplied to you. Supplier has supplied to you when he had goods with him, तो उसकी परचेज जेन्युइन हो गई। अब उसने जो इनपुट टैक्स आपस में आपके सप्लायर ने जज किया, दिस मींस एक्चुअली पेड द टैक्स। अगर वो कहते हैं आपका सप्लायर एग्जिस्ट ही नहीं करता, हाउ विल यू प्रूव दिस सिचुएशन? इट इज इम्पॉसिबल, नो कोर्ट विल गिव रिलीफ। कैसे प्रूव करेंगे आप? वो कहते हैं जी आपने मिस्टर वर्मा से मार खरीदा है, मिस्टर वर्मा को तो मरे भी 10 साल हो गए, ये कहां से पैदा कर लिया आपने? देयर आर केसेस लाइक दिस इन जीएसटी, द पर्सन बट डेड, उनके भी टैक्स बना ली। तो कैसे करेंगे आप? हाउ कैन यू से उसने रिटर्न भरी है जी? अरे वो कैसे भर सकता है, बंदा ही नहीं है। The companies have run away, directors have run away, so therefore both these conditions go against the recipient. In case there is an investigation and the authorities propose to invoke section 73-74 to deny you input tax credit. Now the law uses the word short paid, not paid. Both are covered by section 73, we will discuss. If you do not pay tax, input tax is not available to you. If you pay short or claim undue refund, input tax credit, that's all covered by section 73. Now we come to next section, 16.
Input tax credit admissible, उसी से बैकग्राउंड होना चाहिए। One of my case in India, उसमें क्या हुआ, एक डीलर ने
गूगल आपने खाली पीस तो पहन जाए यार, स्मार्ट बनने के लिए बड़ा बहुत जबरदस्त डेडली कॉम्बिनेशन है। लाइक can't be your girlfriend like too fat, but थोड़ा हंसना जरूरी है यार, मुझ पर लग सकते हैं।
आप मेरी गर्लफ्रेंड बनोगे तो मुझे मोटी
नहीं मैं तो आगे जो मोटा बोलती है नीचा, रोज मेरी तरह मोटा है, मैं तेरी तरह बन गया तो तेरे को गलती नहीं करेगी।
तो केस क्या था कि एक डीलर ने गूगल डीलर से परचेज किया और मेरे बैंक ने उस डीलर से परचेज किया। उनके पास गूगल डीलर नहीं हो गए, वो जिससे मैंने परचेज करी थी उनके पास चले गए। वो स्टेटमेंट दे रहा है कि भाई मैंने इसको गुड्स दिए हैं और मैंने इसको इनपुट भी दिया है, मेरा ये ठीक है, मैंने गलत किया है तो ठीक है। तो इंटेलिजेंस कहती है कि इस पॉइंट पे कि इसने जो सेट ऑफ करा है अपना टैक्स, वो इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट एडमिसिबल नहीं था उसके पास, इसलिए उसने सेट ऑफ किया।
We are going to discuss when we come to 73. Admissible, eligible, there are two words used in law. We will discuss this in detail. We are touching it today. Thank you so much.
बट गुड इन ट्रांजिट हम इसको कह सकते हैं कि मन चेंज हो जाता है तो
क्या ले सकते कैसे? No, not now. Not after 19 after the amendment to can't. ले रहे हो तो बिल्कुल गलत है, illegal. And this amount to fraud, notwithstanding 5 crore or not 5 crore. This is fraud.
आप नेक्स्ट मंथ में
तेरे क्लाइंट को बोलूंगा इसकी फीस भी 2 साल बाद दियो, क्योंकि आ तो जाएगी, क्या फर्क पड़ता है?
मिल जाए तो अच्छा।
In tax laws, you have raised a very good question. In tax laws, you cannot add anything or delete anything from the equity. जो लिखा है वही करना है. Tax knows no equity. आपके पास 20 दिन होते हैं जब कितना टाइम लगता है 50 दिन। एक अप्रैल से अगले अगले महीने की 20 रिटर्न भरनी होती है। Why can't you follow with your supply? उनके पैसे रोक लो ना। हमारे सारे पटकान में पैसे रोकते हम टैक्स देते ही नहीं, रिटर्न एग्रीमेंट से जो नए कस्टमर हमारे लोग माल खरीदते हैं हम उन पर टैक्स देते ही नहीं। You want to sell us this our condition? जब भी आप रिटर्न भरेगी आपको नेक्स्ट पैसे मिल जाएंगे। मतलब पैसा आने में आजकल के मैं ट्रांजिट कंप्यूटर पे भरना है अपने यार, लंदन से थोड़ा पैसा ला रहा है टैक्स आपका।
गुड्स के ट्रांजिट के लिए बोल रहे हैं, गुड्स ट्रांजिट के लिए बोल रहे हैं।
गुड्स इन ट्रांजिट
Goods must have been received.
yes
If they are transit, can you say these are received? The word received, what is your good name? Rahul. You have raised a very critical question. Why have they used the word received? Because received avoids constructive delivery. The constructive delivery has been recognized in explanation of section 16. On B2C2 transaction, constructive delivery has been recognized, but only for the particular explanation. The word received does not recognize constructive delivery. कि ट्रांजिट में आपको अब आपके पास तो आधार आ गई, ऐसे कल को बोलेंगे बोर्ड पे ले लेंगे, बिल ऑफ लीडिंग तो आ गया मेरे पास, जहां डूब गया आपका, हाईजैक हो गया, रशिया के बंदे ले गए, तो ट्रांजिट आ गया, मैं ले लेंगे तो। That is why the lawmakers use the word received. A past perfect tense is used in law drafting. This language is extremely critical. पूरा section 16 past perfect में. That is the meaning of receive. So in transit is not allowed.
सर लॉट्स और इंस्टॉलमेंट में भी जो आता है उसको भी लास्ट इंस्टॉलमेंट के बाद में मानते हैं।
उसका लॉजिक और है, पढ़ेंगे उसको। वो आप इतना जानते हैं, इसका लॉजिक बहुत बड़ा है, उसका लॉजिक बहुत बड़ा है।
सर मगर इसमें प्रॉब्लम ये आएगी कि जैसे टू बी बढ़ते हमारा इनपुट
उसका लॉजिक ये है कि सपोजिंग आपने किसी से 1 लाख टन स्टील लेना है, ठीक है, 1 लाख स्टील टन तो
आ जाओ जगह देख रहे थे किसी का नाम मुश्किल है ढूंढना।
तो पूछा कि पहली अंदर से ना राहुल में गया था बाकी
राहुल को रोज सुनने को मिलेगा, राहुल को रोज सुनने को मिलेगा।
ये सेशन के बाद
भाई साहब, मैंने एक बार बार में कोई 1.5 लाख रुपए डोनेशन दिया, मेरे को उसके सुनते आज 15 साल हो गए, इंक्लूडिंग में से बांट दिया। तुमने होली पे लड़कियों को डांस कराने के लिए 1.5 लाख रुपए, मुझे मैं था भी नहीं, मुझे पता भी नहीं, तो मुझे 15 साल हो गए सुनते हुए। हाँ तो फिर आप ऐसे गंदे काम करोगे सुनोगे यार, तो सबके सामने पावत लगा रहे हो। वो तो आफ्टर थॉट है कि मेरा बैग गिर गया था, कॉपी गिर गई थी, कुछ हो गया।
नहीं गंदा नहीं, पर कभी भी किसी लेडी को, हाँ जी कपूर साहब, लाइफ में
क्या होता है देख,
लाइफ में किसी लेडी को कभी भी किसी भी एज को आंटी मत कहना।
अब ये थी मोस्ट एक्सपीरियंस in this room. Give me a word of advice.